Well, we're going to kick off today's episode with some comments from Lewis Hamilton after this weekend's Hungarian Grand Prix. Had a bit of a tough one, didn't he? And he called himself useless and said Ferrari probably needs to change driver after failing to reach Q3, while teammate Charles Leclerc, of course, took pole position. It followed another poor weekend in Belgium where Hamilton was knocked out early in both sprint and full qualifying, and Leclerc now leads their one-lap head-to-head 12-5 this season. After his exit at a track where he holds a record 9 poles, Hamilton said on team radio, every time. When asked about the message, he told Sky Sports, it's me every time. I'm useless, absolutely useless. The team have no problem. You've seen the cars on pole, so they probably need to change driver. Sam, are you concerned about these comments, or are they more frustration in the moment?
I'm concerned for him. Lewis Hamilton wears his heart on his sleeve. We've said this before. He's a very open person when he's discussing how he feels about things. He takes things very to heart. He's quite a sensitive chap. I quite admire that in the world of Formula One. It's very different to what we're used to. When Formula One drivers, all athletes, tend to bottle things up. So I think it's good that he's willing to speak so candidly and so openly to the press and the public. What I'm concerned about is he seems to not be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel in this situation. He's built up this move to Ferrari for obviously over a year when he got that exchange when moving from Mercedes to Ferrari. They declared it before the start of the 2024 season. We finally get that move at the start of the current season. And we're all filled with optimism. Obviously, he picked up that sprint pole and win in China. And that you think, right, this is a good start. The car's not there, but, you know, this is a good start. Hamilton is competitive. And it's really being a lack of both quality and overall results for Lewis Hamilton. I think Hamilton before could have had one of his worst Grand Prix and he might have still ended up in the top 3 or 4. And it really would have been a bit of a bad day, but a bad day for Hamilton is third, you know, whereas now a bad day for Hamilton is out in SQ1 and then Q1 and you make a good strategy call and it gets him into 7th place in the race, you know, that's, it's not ideal. So I'm concerned for Lewis Hamilton's mindset. And I really do hope that someone puts their arm around him. Just because he's the 7-time world champ, just because he's got over 100 victories, over 100 pole positions, I just think that someone needs to put their arm around him and go, look, you don't gel with this car, you don't work with these current regulations, but so much is going to change and you are a fundamental part of that development going to the new regulations that it can get better. And he's still got such good raw ability. Well, he does get into those windows that it seems to work for him. He's electric. He's amazing to watch drive. So whilst I don't know if he's ever going to win another title or multiple races in a season, he's still got the talent to be a great driver for a team like Ferrari at the end of his career.
You mentioned, I think very rightly, he needs someone to talk to him, to remind him of everything he's done. Is there a problem that person might not exist at Ferrari? Is that person Fred Vasseur, or is that person who might have done that job at Mercedes not there at Ferrari?
I don't know. It's really hard. Obviously, he brought Angela back, who he worked with so closely at Mercedes, and you could see her regularly following him around the paddock. And I think part of why he rehired her was to have that familial link between, you know, the previous home and the current home. Fred Vasseur, I think, has a lot of love for Lewis Hamilton. They're a very open relationship. They're very caring of kind of how that works with Ferrari. I think Leclerc is the same. I think they're kind of like a weird, almost little family between the three of them and the two young men that kind of grew up in racing under Fred Vasseur. I think that's lovely. I think that's great. I think Fred would happily take Lewis to one side and say, look, we trust you. We care about you. We think you're fantastic. You've got what it takes. Have a bit of self-belief. What is worrying me is the relationship that Hamilton has with his race engineer.
I agree. Yeah.
Ricky Adami is a very talented individual. He really is. But unlike what we saw with Bono and Lewis Hamilton, and the way that Bono now talks to Kimi Antonelli, he has previous of causing a lack of communication, the famous science radio of, hello, Ricky. That's the same guy. We're talking about the same guy here. You know, this guy's got to that point. He's a lead race engineer for Ferrari for a reason. He's very smart, very talented. But I do wonder if, while Sainz was maybe quite willing to be adaptive and push through some frustrations because of where Sainz was in his career, Hamilton doesn't need that and doesn't want that. And I think Hamilton maybe needs a bit of a change of scenery, which will allow him to be more understood, expressive, have someone that understands the way he speaks and the information he needs, because we've seen so much friction already. It's not like it's gotten better. We're still seeing frustrations between those two. And I wonder if that is now emerging in Lewis Hamilton's thoughts of, I don't want to be the guy that blames the team. And I do wonder if that's something that's niggling a little bit that could ease the relationship and make him feel a bit better if he had someone like he had with Bono, that he could, bit of brotherly love, kind of take you aside and go, come on, mate. We're a team. We've got this. I don't think Adami has that with him. I think it maybe is letting Lewis's side down a little bit.
It's funny you mentioned Carlos Sainz, and I saw this a few weeks ago, so apologies. I can't give credit to whoever did this analysis, but they were looking at all of the drivers and how much time on average per race they are either on team radio talking or on team radio listening. Carlos Sainz is number one by an absolute mile at Williams this year. And it might be a contrast to what he had last year with Ricky. But I also noticed there was something from the Hungarian weekend where he asked what his pace was like relative to the cars in front. Silence.
Yeah.
And he has to push for an answer. Must be very frustrating. Harry, any concern about the comments that he made after qualifying?
It is concerning. I'm not because I don't believe Lewis Hamilton is still not one of the most talented F1 drivers in the world. But it's concerning about his motivation and his confidence in his ability, which has seen him to such great success so far in his career. And I think all F1 I mean, look at Fernando Alonso as a prime example. The self-belief he has, even if it's sometimes it could be misplaced, but it would never be he would never come. Alonso coming out going, yeah, I'm useless. It just wouldn't happen, would it?
No, it wouldn't happen. Pigs
would fly before that would happen. So
it's world opposite day.
Yeah. Yeah, psych. But that's what I mean. I think for me, that's the most concerning thing. And I know Lewis Hamilton wears his heart on his sleeve, always has done in his career. But I don't think I've ever seen him that down after a competitive F1 session, whether it was the qualifying on the Saturday or the race, and thinking itself, it should be a concern. I've got no doubt he's going to go away and have a reset over the summer break and come back more positive. But if you're having those thoughts and you're airing those thoughts publicly, what is he not airing publicly? What does he have? What are those thoughts like when the doors are shut behind him? I think that in itself is more concerning. I'm with you, so I believe he's still capable of winning GPs. It's only a year ago he was winning GPs. He won the British GP, obviously he won Belgium on a technicality, but was obviously there on pace-wise anyway. It's not that long ago. It's even sooner that he got the pole and sprint win or sprint pole and sprint win in China. Like that was a few months ago. And that was like classic. That was like watching classic Lewis Hamilton. He was on such form. So if the car's there, I still believe he can make it perform. But I think he's finding the Charles Leclerc challenge more challenging than perhaps he expected. I always thought it might be, especially on a Saturday. But the problem is this year, especially, Saturdays have been so important that he can't really afford to not be good on a Saturday. And versus Leclerc, as you referenced, it's now 12.5 in the head-to-heads. Hamilton's just not had the pace to keep up with him. So, I think that must be damaging his self-confidence somewhat. Because whereas with Russell, yes, Russell will sometimes beat him. I don't think it was quite this one-sided potentially. But yeah, like I said, I think the real concern is his motivation, his self-belief, and I guess that was always a risk in this stage of his career to make such a move. This is such a culture change for him. And having been at Mercedes he's always been part of the Mercedes family up until this year, whether it was at McLaren or even in his junior career. And that, that's easy to get institutionalized, but in a good way for Hamilton, because he's so part of that culture. Then moving to Ferrari, where the culture is so different, you're learning. There's new languages to be learned. There's new people to work with. I think this was perhaps always a risk, and maybe one he just hadn't thought would be as challenging as it has been. So, yeah, for me that's the real concern. But relationships can be built, and as we talked about previously, he's got a long list of things he's been giving to Ferrari. So maybe one of them is change my race engineer. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not sure whether there's a big enough change for him to help. It remains to be seen. But yeah, that's probably the most concerning thing for me now. I just really hope, because we don't want to see Hamilton. I'm not suggesting he's going to retire, but I don't want to see Lewis Hamilton sort of go into some decline or slump into nothingness and then leave the sport, because that would just be depressing. And I don't think that will happen, but I want him to regain his mojo before he does leave the sport. Oh God.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. Yikes, got dark real quick there. Going back to one thing you said, Harry, one thing that all racing drivers need is an unwavering self-belief. Like they need that. And all the drivers have it. We often talk about it when it comes to Verstappen and Ayrton Senna and Michael Schumacher, and how they can get involved in incidents and it looks plain as day, like, okay, that's on them. And they will still think it's not on them because they just have this self-belief that they are in the right. And it works on a racing track. All the drivers have had it. Like you look at I remember a few years ago, Kevin Magnussen, he did an interview and he was asked about his goals in F1, and he was at Haas at the time. And he was asked about his goals and he said, I'm going to be world champion. I want to be world champion. And everyone laughed at him. But you have to have that. You have to have it. Even if you think from the outside there's no chance it's going to happen, you yourself need to think that's going to happen. Sergio Perez, whenever he was asked about his chances versus Verstappen, was always very bullish about what he could do. I mean, it very rarely came to fruition, but that's not the point. You need that belief. So there is a bit of concern about these comments. And I think at least some of it is not just in the moment frustration. I think it has built up a bit over time. You're right to say in terms of qualifying, there's a lot of frustration there, perhaps more so because that was for so many years his forte. Like it was very difficult to stop Lewis Hamilton on a Saturday. He's still got far more poles than anyone else in F1 history. But so far this year, Charles Leclerc has had 5 top 3 starts. Lewis Hamilton hasn't had any. Charles Leclerc's only had 1 Q2 knockout. Lewis Hamilton's had 4. And it's difficult to come to terms with that. As you said earlier, Sam, because of the success that Lewis Hamilton has had previously in his career, it's very difficult to go down from that, to settle for something like a P5 and a Grand Prix, because that, compared to what you used to achieve, is basically last place. But that's the situation he finds himself in right now. It is difficult to hear, just from I think an overall fan's perspective on it. It is difficult to hear these words because he entered this year with such motivation. Like Lewis Hamilton is probably the only F1 driver that could leave the sport and probably earn similar amounts of money doing something else. Like if he wanted to commit himself to fashion, to music, all of these other side interests he has on top of F1, he would nail it. I am convinced. But he chose not to do that. He chose not to retire after leaving Mercedes. He actively wanted to go to Ferrari, and he has been very motivated to make it work, which makes it even more difficult when you commit yourself so much to something and it doesn't work, as has been the case so far this year. Sam, can he turn it around in 2025, or are we specifically looking to next year now?
I think 25 is done. The car isn't changing. The upgrades, that they're pretty much packing those in at this point. And I almost want him to just take the time to accept it's not going to be good and work on how to make it good for 26, identify the areas that don't work for him. Is it the feel of the car? If so, is it because it's a ground effect car, or is it because of the way that Ferrari have set up the car? Of course, they've got a new brake structure that they brought in for this year that was very new. Maybe it doesn't work for him. Is it the way the Ferrari engine handles? Is it the fact that actually it might be a cultural thing, as you mentioned earlier? Is his relationship with Adami causing him to not have the confidence in the information he needs to react fast enough? That means that he can't be more proactive in a Grand Prix. Is it the Italian culture? Is he missing something from home? Is he going through what I can only label as like talented child syndrome, where you're the really talented kid and then you get to normal adult life and you're like, I was just really hyped up as a kid and now I'm like a really normal person? And that's like, is Lewis Hamilton at that point in his career where he was really the talented kid for like his whole career, and he's peaked, so he's at Ferrari, and actually maybe he's not as good as he once was. And that's okay, because Lewis Hamilton, not as good as he once was, is still better than most. So can he work on being more consistent rather than being outright in raw pace better than everyone else? I do think that use the last 10 races to learn. Don't get annoyed. Don't get frustrated. Don't get upset. Learn what is wrong with the situation and try your absolute best to create a solution, a workaround, another option that allows you to at least be, if Ferrari have a competitive car next year, to at least be good enough that if Leclerc is winning that title, he's second or third, and he's there supporting the team, and he brings home a constructor's title for Ferrari, for example. Because I think, whilst I think he'd be gutting not to win a driver's if it was on the cards, he could at least walk away from the sport knowing that he brought Ferrari a constructor's. I'm sure a little part of him will be very proud of that. So, yeah, I think he needs to not give up, wait until 2026. And there is a part of me that thinks these new cars might be a little bit closer to the routes that Hamilton really enjoys driving.
Harry, ahead of the shift into the new era of F1 next year, even if we're considering 2025 a bit of a dead year for him and for Ferrari, does he need a result, like a one big result for the rest of this season, just to prove to himself he can still do it?
I think at this point, yes. I think he does need, even if it's not a race where it's outright pace, it's, mixed conditions, like a Silverstone last year, for example. I think, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Because he's Lewis Hamilton. He's the most successful driver that we've ever had. But I think just to help that confidence, that self-belief, boost it again, having a result with this new team, which quite frankly, I thought the sprint in China would deliver. Not that he was struggling before that point, really, but I thought, oh, we're back, but I was like, we're kind of back here with Hamilton. I just the way he drove that race, that qualifying lap, I thought, hello, we could be on for a good year here with Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari, and it's not materialised, and it just seemed to slip downhill increasingly since then. So I think it doesn't even have to be a win, but I think a good result where he's still not at a podium yet, has he, this year, which is ridiculous.
Weirdly, he's had 2 sprint podiums, one of which has been a win, and no main race podium.
I think a main race podium. I think a top 3 would really help him. So, and obviously a win even more so. So I think it I don't know. It's going to be difficult because who knows with that Ferrari, but Leclerc's proved that it's almost possible, and it is possible. So yeah, I think something like that he needs to have just for himself more than anything. I don't think he needs to prove it to anyone. I think he just needs a boost as he goes into the second half of the year.
Yeah, I think there could be a good result somewhere in this second half of the year for Lewis Hamilton, just based on how Ferrari have looked a little bit better in the dry recently, at least versus Mercedes and Verstappen. Certainly Verstappen and Red Bull's pace seems to be a bit hit and miss, but more missing than hitting at the moment. Antonelli's struggling, and Mercedes, I think, are a little bit worse off than where they were at the beginning of the season. So if they can get to a situation like Austria, where they were quite clearly the second best team behind McLaren, suddenly you've got sort of 4 cars there, one of which being Hamilton. You imagine a podium is going to come about sooner rather than later if he can keep finding himself in that sort of spot. And who knows, if something goes wrong for the McLaren duo, maybe he can take a win. Looking at the 10 races left, I'm not sure where his best opportunity will be. Leclerc's going to win COTA, obviously, because we're there and that's the rule. Leclerc's going to win that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the other 9, they all seem up for grabs. So we'll see.
It's so weird, that Ferrari car, isn't it? Like it's come out that Leclerc's thing at Hungary, where it just got progressively slower. The tyre wear wore down. It meant the pressures got lower. It meant the car got lower to the floor. It affected the bumps further. The plank was wearing further. The car is just undrivable the moment it gets into a lower range of tyre wear, and we've got a bumpy track. And that just makes any racetrack so hard to predict for them if they're actually going to be successful. And that so makes it even harder for Lewis Hamilton, who needs almost the ultimate weekend to come together for him. It must be so frustrating right now at Ferrari.
As we often say, there's something in that car. It just has the operating window of a paperclip. Like it's very just, you can't get there with it.
Put Clippy in the car.
Put Clippy in the bin. Having to do my best not to swear at Clippy. I'm not going to do it.
I feel like this is the second time Clippy's come up on the podcast in recent history.
Yes, it's not the first time. Little. No, not gonna.
You youngsters that don't know Clippy, do some homework.